The federal government pegged gas as a key part of Australia's energy transition and export future with the announcement of its future gas policy.
Yes, and since then it's been almost universally panned by climate groups who reckon it'll be devastating for the chase towards emissions reduction targets. Polly Hemming is the director of the Australia Institute's Climate and Energy Program, and she joins us now. Polly, welcome to the program. We were told that this strategy was months in the making. It included widespread consultation and input, and yet it seems to have taken so many by surprise. Were you included in that? Were you either consulted or surprised?
Not surprised, not terribly shocked. This is something that was actually flagged in the federal budget about this time last year, and essentially it's a reprisal of the coalition government's gas-fired recovery, except the premise is kind of even more flimsy. It's now gas-fired renewables, and it's a plan that sets out gas production and exploration and expansion through to 2050 and beyond. And I think it's really important to note that it's not just being panned by environmental groups, it's being panned by economists as well and public policy experts. It's a plan that's based on three fairly baseless assumptions, which is that the gas industry has and continues to be critical and beneficial to the Australian people, that we are facing looming domestic gas shortfalls in Australia, that we need gas to revive our languishing manufacturing industry, and that we also need to be meeting the needs of gas executives or gas companies in countries like Japan and Korea, and that seems to be the fundamental basis of the entire policy.
All right, so on the domestic supply front, we have had warnings from energy market operators and regulators, Polly, that there were looming shortages. As you say, that's repeated in the strategy. Why do you contend that that is not the case, particularly on the East Coast, although I think the strategy also says shortages loom for domestic Australians in Western Australia as well?
Yeah, so the strategy actually says that demand is dropping on the East Coast, and AEMO, who is the regulator that the plan is relying on, has been saying for some time that actually gas demand will be dropping on the East Coast. In the West Coast, the plan itself also acknowledges that there might be some increase, and this is all about likelihoods. There's no certainty, and the plan itself says that there may be some shortfalls in Western Australia, but while we may be facing, so just say theoretically there might be some shortfall in the near term, the biggest user of gas in Australia is the gas industry itself, who uses our gas in Australia to liquefy gas for export, and we export a vast majority of our gas. We use about 80% of our domestic gas supplies to produce gas for export. So if there was any question of shortfall, then you think that we'd probably be looking to who is using the most gas in the first instance. And something that the gas strategy doesn't do is talk about, okay, if we're facing any near-term shortfalls, because we don't know what's going to happen, this is all based on likelihoods and planning, wouldn't the first step be to work out how to use less gas? If we were facing a water shortage in Australia, the first step would be, well, how do we reduce demand and water consumption in the short term while we work out what to do in the long term?
Yeah, now what about... Sorry, Polly. What about public expenditure? The government's been at pains since this document dropped to say there's nothing in it, and indeed there'll be nothing in next week's budget either, that involves public taxpayer funds going into gas-related production or development. Is that correct?
Well, Treasurer Chalmers was sending mixed messages about that. He was certainly distancing himself from the plan and any spending, but I believe there was an acknowledgement there would be some money in the budget for gas. It was quite vague about, meeting shortfalls. But to be clear, Australian governments collectively already provide over $11 billion every year in tax breaks and subsidies to fossil fuels, including gas. The federal government has committed $1.5 billion to a single gas export hub in the Northern Territory. The idea that we're not already significantly subsidising this industry is just completely untrue. And we also don't adequately tax this industry or collect adequate revenue. So most of our offshore gas in WA pays no royalties. Of course, the Petroleum Resources Rent Tax is completely inadequate. We collect more in HECS than we do in PRRT. So while we may not see big outlays in the budget for gas, there are already significant outlays for gas in Australia.